so much for joining in. I'm Dr. Judy Rosenberg, Dr. Judy WTF, What the Freud. And tonight's topic is a highly conflictual one. It is titled Narcissism and High Conflict Marriages. And so you're wondering why I'm choosing this topic. Usually I choose topics because they sort of press on me during the week. And this particular week, and maybe in the last month or so, I've been getting a lot of people signing up for the mind map journey because they're in a high conflict marriage. And of course, if you've been married for a long time and you have children and you have assets together and you have a lot to lose by splitting the marriage, sometimes people will work very, very hard to heal so that they don't have to keep repeating things and detonating and devastating each other. And tonight we're just going to talk about the detonations and the devastations and all the triggers that go off in high conflict marriages. And usually in a high conflict marriage, there is a person who is exhibiting some sort of narcissistic traits, because one of the things that I hear most often amongst couples is that one of them is complaining that they just are not being heard or seen. The other one is complaining that they're not getting what they want out of the marriage. And they definitely do not seem to be landing on the same page. That is something that I really notice about high conflict relationships, is that they are not on the same page, meaning that they just don't see eye to eye. And they may describe a situation completely differently than the other. So the same situation will present in a completely different fashion. And both of the parties are convinced that that's how it went down. And of course, if we took a movie camera to it and filmed them, which sometimes I even advise my patients to do when they're in the middle of a high conflict, maybe tape it, maybe film it, not to embarrass each other, but simply so that they can bring it into therapy and we can go over it and we can do something which is very, very hard for narcissists to do, which is self-reflect and self-correct. Why is that hard to do? Because they live in shame. And for them, self-reflection and self-correction is basically shining the flashlight on their inner shameful core sense of self that they try to wall off because they just don't want to present that. And so this wall protects them from being hurt, but it also, as many of you know, protects them from having an intimate relationship. So I'm hoping that I'm going to get call-ins here, because there are a lot of people out there who are experiencing high conflict marriages. They don't know what to do, especially with kids involved and financial, basically when you're in financial bed with the other partner, you own a house together, bank accounts, property, and other assets. It's very hard to extricate yourself from this, not to mention how difficult it is to divorce a narcissist. So let's get into mind mapping, where this all stems from and who would even put up with this, and how to deal with it if you're in a high conflict relationship. So if you don't mind, let's go back to the mind map. So the mind map is a pathway of healing that I created to look at how childhood wounds react in us and code in us, and then take us down into chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. And the breakdowns of the high conflict marriage is what we're going to be talking about today. So why is this all happening? Well, it takes two to tango. So obviously from both ends, there is a hand in glove fit here. So when a person is narcissistically injured, then what happens is there is a narcissistic defense that goes up around the injury, similar to a biological model. If you're injured, then your skin will get thick, it'll get calloused, it'll build more cells around it, and then it'll be harder to penetrate that area of the skin that's been defended. much to this is much analogous to what happens when a narcissist is injured. So let's go to the injuries, because I talk a lot about the cause. What causes this? So certainly this does not come out of the blue. I lean heavier on nature and nurture. I am more the nurture leaner, because nature we can't help. Our genetics are set, and our nurture is something that we get to control by being better parents, by being better nurturers, by creating stable foundations and families and so on, which I'll get into, a la John Bowlby, attachment theorist, and what it takes to form a healthy psyche. So in a narcissistic family, the problem is that the parents lack empathy. They also use their children to put power and control over. They may use their children to fulfill their agenda. They may also reward their children for pleasing them. So it's a very interesting system gone wrong, because it entails being smothered and spoiled on the one hand, overvalued in that sense, and then devalued and criticized, and then emotionally neglected and also objectified. So this is a very, very interesting psychological mix of injuries here. So there's spoiling going on in that the child is overvalued, and then if they don't please the parents, then they are demeaned and devalued and criticized. And then if they do please the parents, they are extremely rewarded, not necessarily with love, because narcissistic parents, again, they lack the empathy to really give the unconditional love necessary to form a healthy human psyche. And so this kind of upbringing makes for a partner that is possibly spoiled, entitled, also shame-based, also fearing criticism, also a partner who doesn't know how to play the we game. And that's essential here, because in order to have a relationship, we have to be healthy enough me's to be a healthy we. And if we're not healthy enough me's, we cannot possibly put ourselves together with another person and expect to have anything but breakdowns or silent treatment or some sort of a human disconnect. So let's take a look at what happens and who the partner typically is of a narcissist. Typically, the partner could be somebody who is a people pleaser, somebody who fears abandonment and will do anything to please the narcissist, a person who comes from an upbringing of being demeaned and devalued and maybe even discarded. And so now is in a system of a marriage and has a partner that may have given them upfront, like a front load of love bombing and all kinds of goodies and presents and compliments and promises and great plans and so on, and more promises. And so then they get hitched up to this person. And what happens is that once the relationship is secured, the goodies stop flowing. So there may be less affection, there may be less gifts, there may be less compliments, there may be less participation to contribute to cleaning the house, and less participation in all kinds of areas. So it's really, as you could see, a really bad deal. And if you've been in one of those, please call in. I want to hear from you, because I want to, of course, mind map the situation and maybe start you on a journey to make a difference in your life and what you're going to do about it. So oftentimes in these dynamics, what you will find is that a family is built. Okay, so now we've got children, pets, and so on. And what I see a lot of is that the husband or the wife with narcissistic traits will actually use the children and use them as little flying monkeys to bite the other partner in the proverbial butt, so to speak. And the kids would then be kind of like on team mom or team dad's side. And if they dare to switch sides, then punishment is in order. And you can imagine what this must be like in a divorce process or after a divorce process, where there's really little reason to, or no reason to work anything out, and how divided the children are feeling, and how they feel that they're being torn apart by their loyalty to one parent or another. So you could see that this is really a whole basis, a conflict-ridden situation. And so if we go back to the mind map, let's look at those shadows that I call childhood wounds. So I'm going to enumerate them, and then I will go back into the narcissistic injuries and who signs up for this program, so to speak, of being with a narcissist and really bearing a life of being demeaned and devalued. So if you look at panel 1 with all of the light behind it, the light represents our authentic self. It represents who we should have, could have been. It represents us without our injuries, us connected to, if you will, the light, unconditional love. The shadows represent all of the blockages that block us from receiving this light, that hurt us and injure us and compromise our mental health. Things like verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, smothering, spoiling. So these are all the elements that block our ability to manifest the best of our best. And in the case of people who have incurred these injuries, they are going to have reactions. If we go to panel number 2, we could see that this is a metaphor here. You could see all the broken glass and all the shattering going on. This is a metaphor for the shattering of the psyche. And so children are delicate. They are delicate, and if they're not handled well, their spirit can be broken, their mental health can be broken. And in the case of these injuries, when you break a child, they can react by shutting down and walling off. They can react by becoming aggressive and fighting. And this actually represents an area of the brain that I refer to as the amygdala. And the amygdala is the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn center. It doesn't think things through in a cognitive fashion. It's reactive. And when you're living with somebody who is in a narcissistic rage, which happens when they're breaking down, you could see the arrested development part of them come out. And this arrested development is similar to a 2 or 3 year old child who's tantruming. They don't get what they want. Me. They don't know how to take responsibility and look in the mirror and say, hey, you know, maybe I did make a mistake. Maybe I did mess up in the relationship. Let me fix this with you because you are valuable, because we are valuable. There is no sense of we in a narcissistic system. It's a me-centered world. So with that said, can you see how it doesn't really make for relationship material? And if you're in one of those relationships, well, I'm sorry, because it could be very, very straining and draining and vampiring. And I mean that in a most emotionally literal sense, that when you're around people who take and don't assume any responsibility for their own behavior, it's really a pathway to being drained. And you could feel this. You could feel this in your body. And some people feel it very, very much so in their backs and shoulders and their stomach and headaches. I had a patient tell me about an experience where he was massively throwing up after breaking up with a narcissist because there was so much poison in him. He felt that he had to basically vomit up all of this psychological poison. I can't think of a better way to put it. So that's where boundaries are so important. So let's back up for a minute. What are we going to do with all this mess? Okay, so let's say you're in a high conflict marriage. You're married to a narcissist. Step number one, you've got to heal yourself. You've got to look in the mirror and do exactly what I was talking about, self-reflect and self-correct, and ask yourself, why am I putting up with this? Why am I even here? What is it about me that incentivized me to be in this relationship? And if I'm in it and I want to remain in it, what am I willing to do to set boundaries so that the person can no longer toy with my emotions and my heart and my finances and my time? And so again, very important step number one, heal thyself. And that means you've got to look at your childhood wounds and your reactions and your negative core beliefs and what's being triggered in the relationship. And oftentimes you will find that the person that you are married to is a direct reflection of your family of origin. And so often I find that people are doing what I refer to as the Freud. And I refer to Dr. Sigmund Freud and his repetition principle as the Freud, because we repeat things ad nauseum until the psychological file is either complete or we go bust in our energy and we can't go on any further. So if you come from a family of parents who neglected you, if you come from a family of parents who abused you and used you and set you up to play out their agenda, if you come from parents that lack empathy and lack the ability to also role model to you owning their own stuff and taking ownership, then that's probably why you're in the relationship. And if you haven't already gotten a copy of my book, please do. Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. It talks about this in the book. I connect all the dots. You can see all the dots in the DNA strand, which is metaphorical for your blueprint, your family of origin blueprint, your multi-generational blueprint. And the goal of the book is to break people of the multi-generational transmission of psychopathology. And of course, the goal of the therapy is just that. So if you haven't gotten a PDF of it, it's free. You can just sign up for it and then download it. If you want to buy it off of Amazon and have a hard copy of it, you could do that also. And if you want to learn the mind map, please access my mind map video series. And there's plenty of video in there breaking down every single panel. It's very psychoeducational in nature. So I'm going with prevention here. So if you're not in a relationship, please prepare yourself to be in one if that's what you want. And in order for you to prepare yourself to be in one, you've got to heal yourself. It's vital, because if you don't, it's surprising that you will repeat things that you didn't even think you could repeat. Even things that you said to yourself, I'll never be like my mother. I'll never be like my father. I'll never marry somebody like my mother or my father. Well, never is just never going to work out that way. It usually works out that you do. And so step number 2 is, if you're not in a relationship, learn about narcissism, learn about psychopathology, learn your own psychopathology, learn your own aspects of narcissism so that you can bring to the table the best of you and then know what to look for in a partner. Because I love Einstein's statement. I say it in my book. I quote him: smart people solve problems. Geniuses prevent them. So let's be geniuses. So if you're not in a relationship, learn all about this. Learn about human disconnect, because if we're not connected to ourselves, if we weren't connected in our family of origin, if there was a mother-infant disconnect because your mother wasn't around, or your father wasn't around, or they got divorced early, or one of them died when you were young, or just simply neglected you, these are major injuries. And even though you may not remember, they remain in the psyche in an unconscious form, and these unconscious forces come into play when people get involved in intimate relationships. And the intimate relationship is where it shows up the most. It's not going to show up all that much with a stranger, although it might if you project all your anger on a stranger or an employee or a boss. But mainly, it's going to be your husband, your wife, your significant other. Why? Because they are significant. And if somebody is significant, then you'll either want to exchange love and intimacy with them, or if you don't know how to do that, you're going to try to power and control over them. So let's move to that topic: power and control versus love and intimacy. And if somebody wants to call in, now would be a good time, and we could start talking about your particular situation and why it's high conflict, and how you two are not on the same page, and how you two are not doing a synergistic dance of love and intimacy. So here's the thing. Love and intimacy takes mental health. In order to love and be loved, you have to have what I refer to as permeable membranes. If you look at panel number 5, it is a metaphor for the human cell. And in our bodies, we have cells that are either act as permeable membranes, meaning they let everything in, or they act as non-permeable membranes and they lock everything out, or they act as semi-permeable membranes and they let in the good and keep out the bad. Now, in order to have a relationship, you've got to be semi-permeable. Why? Because if you let everything in, you're going to get flooded by that other person, and you're going to become quickly emotionally dysregulated. I've talked about borderline personality. I think that's the best example of emotional flooding, where there are no boundaries and everything just comes in. And then the emotional dysregulation, along with the fear of abandonment, becomes too much. And then the acting out starts, and the self-harm starts, and so on. So you could see that having no boundaries is not going to work. Now, the opposite of that is the narcissistic defense, which is the non-permeable membrane. Try coming up against a narcissist and you're going to feel the cold wall. You're going to feel a sense of not being able to penetrate. So that would be the non-permeable membrane. And how can you have a relationship with a non-permeable person? Because again, in order to be in a relationship, you have to love and be loved. That means you have to give and receive. And so when you're playing the game of loving and receiving love, and the narcissist is playing the game of power and control, you're just not on the same board. You're not playing the same game of life. And so there's going to be a clash here. And there's going to be, again, no synergy, which I'll talk about in just a little bit, because that's what it takes to have a beautiful, flowing relationship, is a synergistic one. So let's add elements to it. There's this wall, this narcissistic wall, that's a defense mechanism against some sort of vulnerability. And what is it defending? It's defending the childhood wounds of being abused and abandoned and spoiled and then shamed and controlled and powered over and made to feel worthless. So if you were treated that way, wouldn't you want to wall yourself up against all of this pain? And then to make matters worse, it creates what I refer to as a hole in the soul. And this hole in the soul is that space inside the wall that feels empty and worthless and ashamed of him or herself. And this is a painful place. So as a defense, you might see the grandiosity, huffing and puffing and taking on airs of being greater than. And this is not based on anything that even the narcissist believes is so, but it's almost like the mask that helps to shield the inner vulnerability. And oftentimes my patients will refer to this house of cards that they are. And, you know, as they grow in therapy, they'll become more and more honest, and they'll be able to say things, which I think is very therapeutically progressive, by the way. And they're able to say, you know, I have these deep fears that I'm going to be discovered, and I'm spinning plates, and I know that everything looks good on the surface, but inside I don't feel so good, and inside I have a lot of fear. And so what happens is complications occur here, because people will try to defend and numb their feelings, and that's where the drugs and the alcohol and the overeating and the porn and the cheating and all of those elements add to the high conflict relationship, because now the partner is on high alert. Is my husband or wife drinking? Is he or she having an affair? Is he or she going behind my back and siphoning money out of our bank account? So this creates a paranoia. And then the safety nest is really not safe anymore. And so here we have a situation where one is playing detective. And who wants to do that in a relationship? Aren't our relationships supposed to be our haven, where we can kick off our shoes and relax and trust and discuss things and show the worst of ourselves and be loved for who we are, and then be able to be supported for the best of ourselves? This is what a healthy relationship is supposed to look like. Not perfect, just vulnerable. And again, vulnerability is not the favorite game of the narcissist. So I want everybody to understand that these defense mechanisms, these dynamics, these systems gone wrong are created from poor parenting and multi-generational examples and repetitions of poor parenting. So this is grandma, grandpa, great-grandma, great-grandpa, and everyone who has passed on their multi-generational wounds. And now you're sitting with them, and now you're either on the people-pleasing end is one extreme, or the narcissistic end at another extreme, and either you're leaking your energy, and the narcissist is soaking it up and vampiring it out of you, or vice versa. The narcissist is powering and controlling and actually losing respect for you at the same time. So it's not a win situation. If you please the person and do everything that they want you to do, you're not really pleasing the person, you're spoiling the person. And you're also degrading yourself. And you're also losing respect in their eyes. So this pleasing business, let's put it out of business, okay? Because it's not a good situation. And I would love to hear from you. So please do call in, and like to hear how your life is going, especially from people who are experiencing high conflict, a divorce, something that I work with pretty much on a daily basis here at the Psychological Healing Center. And the way I do couples work is that I like to treat people on an individual basis and then also treat them as a couple. Why? So that everyone can understand their childhood wounds and begin the healing process of these wounds so that they can develop a sense of empathy toward each other, for each other, and then move through the healing process and be on the same page. It's really hard to be on the same page when you feel that your partner is your enemy. It's really hard to be on the same page when you've been lied to or cheated on. It's really hard to be on the same page when you don't respect your partner. So it's really important that the healing take place in a parallel and integrated fashion. So in couples therapy, I will see one partner and then the other partner individually, and then I will have them meet in a couple session. So as we go through the process, they can understand each other's childhood wounds. And this gives them the ability to really develop the necessary empathy and insight into each other, because that's something that people lack. They lack the ability to put themselves in another person's shoes, and they lack the insight necessary to understand why the person is behaving the way they are behaving. So as we weave through the process, everyone is healing. The two people are starting to merge their worldview. They're starting to develop a sense of empathy. And then we build a new system that entails a system of synergy. And let's go for a minute to panel number 7, my synergy panel, which is actually my logo as well. And the synergy panel, as you can see, are the bubbles that come together and form light in the center. And if you don't mind putting up panel number 7, I'd appreciate it so people could see it as a metaphor. Thank you. So those are the bubbles. So the blue bubble, let's say, represents you. The yellow bubble, let's say, represents your partner. And the light in the center represents the synergy between you and your partner. And so in the case of narcissism, you can't have light because there's a wall there. And if you're the people pleaser, if you're more emotionally dysregulated and you're just leaking out emotion and you're not able to put boundaries up, then you're going to be sucked dry by the narcissist. And the narcissist will definitely absorb your light. And that absorption process can be very painful to you because it's sapping your energy, time, money, so on and so forth. But it doesn't really help them either. So, don't think for a minute that they're getting away with it. This is not a win situation for them because remember, they have a hole in the soul. So if they take and take and take, then something of that hole in the soul is not allowing them to keep the light. So it's actually draining out of them, which is why they get so hungry for more supply. So they have to keep using you or pick other people to fill the hole or choose alcohol or drugs or porn or whatever they can get their hands on to numb the pain and fill the pain. And it's a never-ending process, and it's a no-win situation. So if you're sitting there thinking, wow, that person got away with it, well, guess what? They really didn't, because full satisfaction means that you're able to ingest something, right? You're able to take it in, and then you're able to digest it, meaning that you're able to extract the nutrients out of it, and then you're able to incorporate these nutrients into the fiber of your being and grow with it, okay? In the case of narcissism, nothing grows. They're just ingesting, and they're not really getting full. And then if you're the other part of that system, then you're just pleasing and draining and doing and doormatting and all of that, and you lose respect for yourself, your partner loses respect for you, and you're just tired and drained and spent on every level. Okay, so can you see how rotten this system is, how destructive this system is, and how difficult it is to be in a relationship like this? So I just want to assure you that healing is possible. It's just not possible to do without opening up these childhood wounds, because there's a concept that I've heard recently called cognitive empathy, and that means that people could learn empathy. They could learn how to say, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I can understand. That was so horrible. But then you'll hear a little hint of narcissism right after that statement. They might say something like, so anyway, did you hear about my job promotion? Or so anyway, did you hear that I've been selected into this contest? So there's just a draw away from the person that's supposed to be, and in that moment, the spotlight. In a narcissistic system, you never get to be the spotlight. And so there's no synergy. So if you look at panel number 7, from a systems gone right perspective, it's a 1 + 1 is greater than 2. So who you are and who your partner is together creates something more than what you can create alone or what he or she can create alone. So it's a co-creation. And if you didn't have that as a model in your family of origin, how would you know what that even looks like? So that's why people live in panel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then they break down and they cycle through and they get triggered by their wounds of childhood, which brings them down into chaos. Then they defend, and then they break down, and then they go back and they self-infect yet once again. And I watched this spin around and around and around, and that's why the mind map is so useful, because it really sets you on a track. Is there a call-in, by the way?
Not at the moment. Just some chatter in the chat room, and
okay. Any questions in the
no questions, just talking amongst themselves, but I think they're enjoying it.
Okay, all right. So I hope you're learning, because I'm really motivated to put an end to this crazy system that is beyond injurious, that creates complex post-traumatic stress. It's a kind of a situation that creates nightmares and flashbacks and all kinds of somatic experiences. And I don't think until recently the narcissistic system gone wrong has been properly exposed. And I'm here to talk about it and figure it out and help you figure it out and help you get straight on the track to healing from this. I'm also working very diligently on my video, which I'll start taping finally next week, called Healing from Narcissistic Abuse. And this is going to be a very, very intense course that you can purchase and learn from and use to take yourself through the mind map system for healing from narcissistic abuse. And then we're also going to offer this in conjunction with services. And hopefully we'll have webinars soon, and of course, always individual services. And you can opt to pick whoever you'd like to work with on the team. My team has all been trained by me. They all know the mind map. And I used to be a traditional therapist and just sort of meander through the process, as many of you know. I'm not a fan of that, because I think that therapy needs to be psychoeducational. If you're not learning, then you're just talking about your pain in the session. And that's not enough. I think we could do better than that as psychologists, as therapists. I think we can impart knowledge to our patients. I think we can impart wisdom to our patients. I think we can teach them prevention. I think we could teach people pattern recognition, because that's what all this is all about. I feel oftentimes that I'm a psychological detective, and I'm looking at people's psychopathology through the lens of patterns and multi-generational patterns, and exploring their childhoods and connecting the dots. Why? So that we can eventually dismantle the system gone wrong before it dismantles you and the relationship, because that's what it's doing. It's dismantling people individually. When they get into a relationship and they think that things are going to be better than it was at home, and oftentimes not at all. One insight that I had today was that people will oftentimes leave a relationship when it becomes more high conflict than their own family. So they'll be able to tolerate the level of conflict that occurs that is in the family, but when it comes out of that range, people will oftentimes look at it and say, that's just too much. In the book, I talk about parents setting the bar. So if you come from a family of arguers, if you come from a family of alcoholics, if you come from a family where there's just a lot of physical abuse going on, it may be your normal. As we know, it's not normal, but it might be your normal. And so when you get into one of those relationships, it might actually feel familiar and familial. And that's not a good thing, because now you've just moved from bad family and bad familiarity to same in a new situation. But again, I see people break when the husband kind of outdoes, or the wife outdoes the injuries of the family. For example, if the family didn't include cheating or porn, and then the relationship includes cheating or porn, maybe the family of origin wasn't all that great, but now the cheating and the porn is just like a new foreign element in there that isn't part of what the person is used to. And then that just may be over the top and enough to break the system and get out. So we want to break the system before you get in a relationship, hopefully. And if you're in the relationship, you want to break the pathological system that you're in your mind, because even if your parents are dead and gone, they're still in your head. And that's why I refer to these infiltrations of patterns and negative core beliefs as the psychovirus. It's because these beliefs about ourselves infiltrate into our head, take a stronghold, and then rule our life and make us believe things like we're not good enough, we're not deserving enough, we're not lovable enough, we're not smart enough, we're not beautiful enough, and the list goes on and on and on. And so this is straight up identifiable. And when you go through the mind map process, you get to identify your negative core beliefs, which I refer to as that Achilles heel, that knife in your heart, Achilles heel that runs you. And sometimes you don't even know what that is. And it's a very interesting process when you discover it. In the confines of the therapeutic process, you find that people believe in things that they didn't even know that they believed in. And we're unearthing all of this, and then they can see it written on paper because they're recording it in their mind map journal, and they're seeing things come out of them like, wow, I didn't know that I felt like I was a burden, or I didn't know that I felt like I was worthless. And then once they discover this, they can root it back to the cause. And then instead of buying into the lies and the misperceptions and the misconceptions, we can start dismantling the lies. So the mind map system, unlike typical therapy is not talk therapy where it's random, where there's no beginning, middle, and end. This process has a beginning, which is panels 1, 2, and 3, which is the how you got encoded part. And then panel 4, 5, 6, how to decode all the mess. And then panels number 7, 8, 9, how to recode you into health. So it's a very organized form of therapy. It's psychoeducational. You get to watch a video with it, and you get to write in a journal so that you have an absolute journey of your process and your psyche. And then, of course, you read the book in conjunction with everything, and then process all your feelings individually with a therapist who helps you identify all these different elements along the way. And so, of course, if you're interested in taking this journey, please don't hesitate to call the Psychological Healing Center. Happy to offer consultations and match you with a therapist that you would like to work with. And just remember, this is time limited to 10 sessions with follow-up as needed. Okay, so in 10 sessions, I find that with the mind map, I do so much more than I used to do years ago when I had no mind map, because I need the map, because I need to know where I'm going, and I need guidance in terms of what to look for, what patterns to recognize. And if I need it, then of course you need it. And if I know how to teach it to you, then eventually you will be able to think like a shrink, as corny as that sounds, and identify your own patterns so that you don't have to come running to therapy every time. Of course, you're welcome back at any time. It's just that we want to make you independent, not dependent. But first, before you get independent, you have to develop what babies develop with parents, proper parents, called healthy dependency. You've got to lean on before you're strong, and before you separate and individuate and launch into the world and become a fully formed human being. And I'm going to refer back to John Bowlby, who says that in order to have a healthy human psyche, you need mirroring, you need a parent that can unconditionally love, parents that are empathic, parents who put your needs before their own, hopefully parents that are in good shape, in good marital shape, structured family that has boundaries and yet respects your individuality, has boundaries and yet allows you to express yourself, has boundaries and yet allows you to fail and make mistakes. All of this is very, very important for people to develop themselves. And if we were all to take on better parenting, for those of you who are going to be parents or are parents, learn about attachment theory and learn about empathy and learn about how you can be multi-generationally favorable towards your own children and give them the best so that they don't have to go through several relationships that break, or they don't have to go through low self-esteem and anxiety and depression and filling their hole in the soul with the drugs, sex, and rock and roll, so to speak. And so this is really, really important that we learn all of this information, which is what I really enjoy doing most. So if there are no questions, is there anybody who wants to call in? If not, if there are no questions in the chat room, then I invite everyone to please call the Psychological Healing Center. We shall offer you a consultation. Grab a free PDF of my book, Be the Cause, and also avail yourself of the Mind Map video series, and learn and learn and learn and prevent. And don't be afraid to face your own demons, so to speak, and look in the proverbial mirror and self-reflect and then correct on it. Because if you don't correct on it, then it's going to cause chaos, defensiveness, and breakdowns. So I will see you on the next episode. And thank you so much for joining in. Good night, everyone.